Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, Mr. Jackson. I was in a panic a minute ago.
You're suspected?
I made sure that I was Cloudlandia ready, so I made sure that my cell phone was completely charged up. And then I was bragging to Babs how I was completely ready. And then I took his cell phone and I said, well, I think I'll have an espresso first. And then I went and I put my phone on top of the something that was near the espresso maker and got my espresso and was drinking my espresso. Then I came downstairs. I said, oh, I forgot my cell phone. I went up and I couldn't find my cell phone.
Oh, no.
They took it. Dean,
they took it. They took
Somebody came in and took my cell phone. Yeah. What other explanation is there?
Well, we're onto something. They don't want us discovering.
And then
Babs,
I said, and this is what I always do when I'm the who can't do the how of finding my cell phone. Then I go to Babs. And Babs walks around, of course.
And there it is.
She says, I think it's on top of we have a kind of a container next to the coffee maker, and it was on top of the container.
Of course it was.
And can I tell you the greatest story of that? And this is the mainland. This is in the Cloudlandia story. We were going to London, and I had my billfold in my hand, and I went downstairs as a last minute to get something. And as I was passing by the book, we have big bookcases downstairs. A book title attracted me, and I took the book out and I put the wallet where the book was. And then I looked at the book, and then I stuck the book back in, and there was a lot of space behind the book. And I got up. I said, I can't find my wallet. And we had to go to London to England, and I had to be very all the time because she had the cat. Yeah. And I got back home, and I went down again to the book, and I noticed one of the books was about an inch out. Pulled it out, and there was my billfold. Do you ever have experiences like that?
Dan, almost every day. I mean, our personality type is what's lovingly known as the absent-minded professor. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. We're frighteningly similar in certain aspects.
You know what? There's something that.
But we have an understanding of each other that
that's true.
That even our mistakes to us turn out to be interesting.
That's exactly right. I had a problem.
Out of every mistake comes a new concept.
That's right. I had a problem for years with my keys. I would constantly be losing my keys. And what I did was I started kind of like, time and motion, like engineering my life. And I did was, this is probably 20, maybe 20 plus years ago now. I got a bowl to keep by the front entrance of my house. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. I had got a table that we put we have a chest of drawers, like as the front thing. And I trained myself to when I walk in the house, I would just drop my wallet and my keys in the bowl. And it was almost like effortless because you didn't have to like hang them on a hook or do anything. It was just like literally the least amount of effort that you could possibly do, just swing my arm and then let go. And there you go. And it's so, I cured myself of losing my keys because now I know exactly where they are. So habits are definitely able to be developed,
Well, habits rule all. I mean, if you look at most of your life, very little of your daily life is actually based on you, consciously deciding this and deciding that. A great deal of it is on automatic.
I love how you say sometimes that nobody wants new habits. We're perfectly happy with the set of habits that we have. That we're nobody. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing that I notice: we on our own may consciously decide to change a habit, like your bowl is a conscious decision.
Yeah.
But the thing we resent most is people from the outside choosing to change our habits.
Oh, yeah.
We most resist other people making a decision that they're going to change our habits, and and I think entrepreneurs may be the class of people who are most intolerant of outside people changing their habits. I'm not sure about that, but but by just consulting with the 10 Quick Start Research Institute of Deep Knowledge, I have a feeling that that's totally substantiated.
That's exactly right.
The ADD Institute of Deep Personal Knowledge, you can actually do that, and it brings up a really interesting topic because I've been kind of what I would say battling with a thought for about I would say about 8 years in my collaboration with Peter Diamandis, and his central thought is that technology is the most disruptive force in the universe right now. And there's something. First of all, I think it's partially true, but I think disruption is something that happens further down or technology is something further down the road. I think the thing that most disrupts the world is unpredictable individuals who disrupt monopolies. Okay. And monopolies come in all forms. Government's a monopoly, corporations are a monopoly, unions are a monopoly. There's ideologies which are a monopoly, and then anything that has has collective control of an area of human activity always tends towards monopoly. For two reasons. One is the people who like getting to the top and controlling a monopoly are the least likely people to innovate anything new.
Yeah, they want to keep it all the same, and they set up all the
they want
regulations.
They want to be whatever monopoly they're in. They want to be at the top, but then their greatest fear is that once they get to the top, they are fearful that some individual out there, unpredictable, is now at this very moment thinking about something, and the individual is not thinking about disrupting the monopoly. The individual is thinking of something new that's going to free up his or her individual life from controls that they're experiencing. We like to escape from controls. I do personally. I kind of resist. And controls are where other people are basically telling you what kind of habits you can have and what kind of habits you can't have, And we resist other people getting us in a box. I would say that's true for you. I would
absolutely agree. Yeah. Well, I think that we're definitely moving that way in every way that matters. Like in everything that, you think about the things where other people would have had a monopoly that have toppled. I mean, we've certainly seen a period over especially the last 10, and let's stretch it back to 20 years, where monopolies in almost every area have toppled. We've seen it in music, the record companies, and they had all of the monopoly, the radio stations, whatever got
the movie studios, the movie studios, the big publishers,
the broadcast
mainstream media, broadcast media.
All of that stuff was, you really realize why powerful people always aspired to owning the media, because it was really control of the dialogue of what's going on. Now you look at it where we're starting to see that in every way, every one of these is every one of those has toppled. There's no, when you look at even the way we consume everything, nobody's sitting by the radio waiting for their favorite song to come on so they can tape it, and that was, press record real quick as it's coming on. Like, that was part of my childhood, growing up, is waiting for your favorite song so you could tape record it while it's on the radio, so you don't have to wait until the next time it comes on.
And then if you, go ahead.
Now I just speak it into existence in my Tesla. I sit in, I get in the car, and I press a button and say, play this, and it plays whatever that is, and it's, I just think, man, we really are like, I think it's getting to the point where the technology now is the equal, it's the given now. It's just like electricity and like, like I think the internet and all the bandwidth, and you've got a radio station, a television station, a movie studio, a printing press, all of that stuff. You've got that in your phone right now. And I think that the refrain, going into the 20s now, that's going to usher in a whole new age of, it's the creativity that's going to matter. I think I shared with you, I'm not sure how much functional, and all of this has come on the back of Moore's law allowing the technology to develop to the point where we have this level of capability now. And I'm not sure, I mentioned to you that the Moore's law is, I don't think, going forward, the thing that is going to be the same amount of impact as what you saw from 1974 or whenever you recognized it and saw. That's something to hitch your wagon to, that's going to be.
I think I probably think that, if you really wanted to narrow that a little bit more to the disruptive effect, it was the personal computer. 1978, IBM is the personal computer. And to the iPhone, I think that's a period of about 25 years. And when the world went mobile, you had particular companies with particular products that were very prominent, but it was a 25-year move from the personal computer. You think back to the real estate industry of what happened when individual agents, and for that matter, individual customers, had access to, comparative pricing, availability, and everything else. And what happened to the real estate industry between the emergence of the personal computer to the cell phone, cell phone, and then the internet, being the global medium that joined everything. So my sense is that I think it's right. Prior to the last 25 years, the most innovative period of the world was actually between probably the 1850s and maybe the 1860s and 1900, because the full impact of railroads and the telegraph and then the telephone and McCormick's Reaper, which actually fed everybody, the Great Revolution in food. And then you hit a period, I guess, flight up, let's say up until the beginning of airplanes, you had motion pictures, but motion pictures already existed. You had sound recordings already before that. And then it was taking advantage of all these breakthroughs, and probably for the next, a period of the next 75 years, it was simply taking advantage and converging them, putting one thing together with the other. And then you got really beautiful. You started getting really beautiful products. I think periods of great disruption are actually ugly periods. You know, it's you don't get any new style out of that. You know, because the style only lasts for, you know, a season, and then another season disrupts it. But there probably is a settling down, and my sense is that the end of Moore's law, not the end of Moore's law, but the slowing down of Moore's law has to do with the heat problem, that the amount of electricity that you need to keep things cool while you're, to even make the chips now is offsetting the productivity breakthrough that you get from the chips. Is that these chip making factories now have to spend so much money on keeping things cool because as you miniaturize, there's a heat factor. Things get hotter and hotter. Well, you can tell it your computer. I can tell how hot the computers are compared to the first computers that we had.
Yes, right. And you
even in your computer.
Yeah, no, but I think that where I think what I've noticed is now we're literally on the cusp of 5G with the cell phone service, which will be, you know, as good as it can get, really, for functional purposes, like instant streaming with no buffering, instant streaming, downloading as fast as you can want to for music or video or anything like that, and instant connection globally. That now any improvement in that is really going beyond what would be noticeable. You know, I think the Cloudlandia, the Cloudlandia infrastructure is fully developed right now. And we've got what we're seeing is that opportunities for people who just dare to say, I can do this too. Like, I mean, you look at, we've talked about Lil Nas X and Old Town Road, that there's the perfect example that nobody can turn something into the number one song ever. And we're starting to see now, with all of this infrastructure that's laid, like all of the technology, all of the collaborative outsourcing execution things that are available, that we're starting to see this onslaught of single product market dominators in a way, right? Where you've got things like the Casper mattresses or Purple mattresses, where they take, you know, one thing, get that, do some innovation there. Then you've got access to an entire global, market with it, and instant delivery. You know, you can get one overnight or in a couple of days or whatever it is. And you start to see that.
Razors. I'll give you a good example.
I was just going to say.
Razors.
Yeah.
I mean, Harry just sits there waiting for the Gillettes and the Schicks of the world to make a mistake. I mean, and you know, Gillette just made a colossal one over the last year with their feminist approach and kind of dissing male makers. And they from the year before, they had $6 billion in profit. They dropped down to less than $1 billion in profit in 1 year because people say, well, screw it. I want to shave. I don't want a message. I don't want a lecture. I don't want a sermon, and just give me a razor. And Harry says, well, we'll just get you a razor. As a matter of fact, we'll make it automatic. Sign up and we'll deliver you your razors every month. You don't even have to go to the school. So it's going to be hard now. And I'm sure that hole in the water that Gillette created didn't last very long. In other words, where did the sales that took away $5 billion in profit, is it there for Gillette to get back? I don't think so.
Yeah, you look at that, and it's because they've had a monopoly for so long. Really, not a monopoly, but I mean, they've certainly been a product leader. There are no.
Well, they certainly had a monopoly over their users, and then they confused their users. You know, the worst possible thing happened to them. Their conformist consumers all of a sudden said, "Hey, there's an alternative out here. That you're ticking me off. I'm kind of irritated. I don't want a product creator to give me a social and political message. I really, and so I just want to buy I just want to buy my message. I just want to buy my product from a product maker who just delivers the product. I don't need a ideological classroom lecture on my shaving habits or my gender, and everything like that. And I tell you that, the corporations really have to walk a fine line here. There's a lot of big, ideological, political, cultural, social issues out there. And the more you just stick to creating value with what you're really good at, I think it's a safe bet to go forward, And, I noticed Harley kind of moving in that direction. I said, you don't have the best motorcycle in the world. You just have the most iconic motorcycle, and you're iconic in just one part of the population. And you shift and say, you're not so good, and we're going to favor the other people. You don't know what made you. You don't. Well, it's your image that made you great. Don't fool around with your image.
Well, I think what's happened, it's an interesting thing what happened that Harley, started out, where they were sort of iconic. When did they start? What's the story of Harley Davidson?
Well,
when did they first?
Well, it's two. I think it's two people. It's Harley and Davidson. And,
yeah.
It was like automobiles. There were hundreds of motorcycle makers, when the whole thing got started, because it's putting the internal combustion machine on a bicycle, basically. That's, whenever, people were doing that. I know for as long as there's been cars, gas cars, there's been gas.
But I'm wondering, what I suspect is that there's, if you look at what is happening right now, that if Harley Davidson is in decline, which I suspect it is, compared to what's happened over the last 20 years, where they were sort of in resurgence, where they had a big period of popularity, and then they waned, and then they had a resurgence of popularity over the last 20 years, let's say, and they're starting to decline again, that I suspect what's happened is not a matter of that they figured out the marketing message or that they have, it's anything that they did, but it was the youth, if you look at pure demographics on it, that like Lee Iacocca, his big thing was making the Mustang right at the beginning, 1964, of the baby boomers, right? And then 20 years later, after they're done with sports cars and they're married with kids, doing it again with the minivan to create
and then he
something
brought out
that they needed.
Then he brought out,
And that's exactly what they needed. Well, I think if you overlay that same thing on the Harley Davidson, they were very popular. Then they got married and had kids, and where they really resurged was this, I won't call it midlife crisis, but the midlife, like the rebellion of going back to their youth when they were in their 40s and 50s. That's the thing. But now they're all turning 65, and you don't see a lot of 65-year-old Harley Davidson riders, right? And that's
and what I've noticed is what I've really noticed is the emergence of basically motor tricycles rather than motor bicycles.
Exactly.
It's either two wheels on the front or two wheels on the back. But, and you see older people driving these, because they're not so sure on corners. They're not
That's
so sure
exactly right.
Yeah,
I just look at the.
Thing. I have to tell you, I saw one of the greatest entrepreneurs who has understood this in New York, and this was with Jeff Madoff, and it's the former model Kathy Ireland, who's got a $2 billion company worldwide, where she is for anything that a busy woman will need from her 20s through to her 70s. Okay, and she's got 40,000 products, but it's for busy women. Yeah. And so she catches them right where, and she catches them sort of at the lead up to the bridal stage. It's the courtship and everything else. And she actually has bridal centers where everything you need, you can go and get married there, and they take care of everything, and they help you with your purchases. They have like a coach. They have like a bridal coach, and then they have actual centers all over the world. And then what's it like the first year of marriage, and then first child, and growing family, and everything like that. And she just keeps identifying. And then, of course, people who make products are attracted to having her as their distribution system for their products. So she's created a single, and she's in her late 50s now, and she kind of knows it herself. She's got 3 kids. She's very busy. And she just looked for everything that would be helpful to busy women who are juggling a lot of different balls in their life.
That's such a great thing. Like, I think, looking at that that's a great, that's profit activator number 1, right? Select the target audience. And that's really the thing when you understand that.
Well, it's funny because you were in for your 10 times within the last 2 weeks, and we introduced the pre-zone frontier. And of all the workshops I had, and it was both Chicago and Toronto, I had 6 of my clients who within the next 6 months will have crossed their 30th year in coach. So they've been back every quarter for 30 years. And I said, I must have done something right there of picking up on, as they grow, what they need.
I would say so. Absolutely. Now, it's really, when I look forward here, and I'm really like, I don't know, there's something to me significant about coming into the 20s as a real proper decade, like we'll be able to say we're in the 20s
that was
now.
certainly true in the 1900s. The 20s were a very unique decade in themselves, and if you think about if you take the 10 decades of the 20th century, probably the 20s, certainly the 60s, and I would suspect the probably, what would you say? You got 20s and 60s are kind of iconic decades. And
I would say the 80s too.
Yeah, the 80s was where Microsoft started in the 80s. Apple started in the 80s.
And the first, 1987, the big meltdown was, Black Monday. That was a big thing compared to the crash in the 20s. So I wonder.
87. That was 87. 1987. I was in New York when it happened. New York's a strange town when the stock market crashes.
I remember I was in economics class in college, and that was a big thing. So, of course, you're immune to it. As a college student, you're immune to what's happening because you don't have any money or any, thing in the stock market or, so you see what's going on and you intellectually understand it, but you don't have any sense of what that actually means and what that was. But, it's kind of a period. And I wonder.
Would you say that was true? Would you say that was true of the the mortgage crisis in 08, 09, because my feeling is that had direct impact on college students in a lot of ways.
Wonder. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, and the reason is because the job market disappeared for them pretty well for.
They wouldn't know that.
They still haven't recovered.
Yeah, they wouldn't know.
And it was much longer. I mean, in '87, you just had a crash, but within, it was for the mortgage one, the prime lending mortgage breakdown was more systemic. It kind of went right through everything. We noticed it showed up first of all in the residential real estate markets in California and Florida. That's where all of a sudden the people who were in our program who were there, they said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take time off from the program. And I've been through a lot of downturns since I started to coach. So I pay attention to the canaries in the mine, I've got certain things that if it's going to affect anybody in our client base, these are the industries where it's going to happen first. And so, we kind of, when hardly anybody knew about it, we were already preparing for it. I told the Babs, I think there's another one coming right now. So we have to switch into a different mode of thinking. We're going to lose the bottom of our client base. And that's what happens. You never lose the top, you lose the bottom.
Right. Well, and I wonder, I think that this time, this is what I suspect, that there are two, I think the reason it's been kind of delayed, and I think that it will be less pronounced when it comes, the downturn, if we're all talking about it, is that everybody's talking about it and anticipating it, and there's a whole group of people on the sidelines waiting for it. And one of the and in the United States, one of the in the United States, one of the political parties actually wants it. Yeah, and they look for they're waiting for the downturn so that they can jump in and exactly. And I think that's going to or shorten, the bottom of it, the downturn. The people are going to get to thinking, okay, I better get in now before it starts turning back up or whatever, and I think that's going to have an impact, because I think there's too many people just waiting to take delight in the downturn, Well, the other thing that has usually kept downturns going, first of all, it's triggered them, was a huge buildup of inventory, where people have products, and nobody's got a big buildup of inventory anymore, because of sensors provided by Cloudlandia, and everybody's up to the minute now with what their situation is, and all. Certainly in the big corporations, that's true. There was a great book. It was called The Whiz Kids, and I don't know if you ever remember what the term the Whiz Kids. I mean, it's a phrase that's become part of the English language, but it referred to a particular group of people, and the lead person was Robert McNamara. Do you remember Robert McNamara? Yeah, I do.
Well, McNamara, he was the Secretary of Defense. Under Kennedy and Johnson and it was a lot of his thinking that made the Vietnam War such a terrible thing, because he was a technocrat, and it was all systems. And but as a 20-year-old, he had been in the U.S. Army Air Force. The Air Force was part of the Army, and he had gathered together a group of similar 20-year-olds, real bright, we call them nerds today, but they created the entire logistics systems for the U.S. Army Air Force in Europe, just on time, fuel supplies just on time, ammunition just on time, parts just on time, skilled personnel, pilots arrive when they're supposed to arrive and everything else. And he had worked out this whole logistics system. And, and Americans had really mastered logistics, I would say a half a century before any other country did. And it had to do just with the transportation systems and supply systems in a country that's 3,000 miles wide. And, and so they watched Sears and Roebuck because Sears and Roebuck just mastered logistics. I mean, in the 1920s, you could go into the catalog of Sears and Roebuck and order a house, and the pre-cut parts for an entire house would arrive at your property 2 weeks later, and all the local carpenters had to do it. They could put. So you think about the logistics, and that wasn't even a Sears and Roebuck company. That was another company that had aligned itself. So he had mastered this. So this group, and I think there were 7 or 8 of them, finished the war, and they said, well, we've enjoyed ourselves, and we've really created something extraordinary here collectively. Why don't we not hire ourselves out as individuals in the marketplace? Why don't we hire ourselves out as a team? And so they put out this team job, if you will. This is who they were and some corporation. And it was Ford, Henry Ford Jr. That wasn't, the original Henry Ford, but Henry Ford Jr. hired them, and they came in, and the big thing they went after right off the bat was just accounting. And they found out, and you have to picture this. Remember the old movies that an accountant would have? It was like a little metal platform, and then it had a big nail that stuck up. And then there was another nail, and then the receivables went on side. Went on
right,
one side,
yes, right.
Went on. Yeah, do you remember that? Well, that was accounting. That was accounting, and Ford Motor Company at headquarters, they had this in the accounting department. And over the years, the accountants had zeroed in on what an inch of receivables was worth and what inch.
Right.
And they'd measure the pile with a ruler. And the interesting thing was, it wasn't till about 6 months after the end of the fiscal year that Ford knew whether it was a profitable company for that year or not. That's how 6 months. It was 6 months before you knew, and it was about 3. It was, it was like certainly many weeks or maybe quarters before you knew you were in trouble. Okay. And my feeling is that there's not a CEO of a large corporation who, at any time he wants, knows what the situation is up to the minute.
Yes, I agree 100%.
That's absolutely true. So I think that's an offset of getting caught by surprise by a downturn.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're right. And I think that, when you look at the new companies that are starting now too, at any level, there are services now, cloud-based services that you can plug into that give you that CFO type of role, all the financials of your business managed without you having to hire that role necessarily.
Yeah.
That's what I mean about that. The all of the execution stuff has become commoditized in the sense that you can buy it. I'm anxious. I'm like on this push to make commoditized a good thing. Everybody talks about their business. The last thing you want is to, become commoditized. Well, I think that in order to grow your business, one of the best things you should be aspiring to is to commoditize your offerings in a way that makes them available. And that's an interesting, it's the thing. If you're trying to, because I don't know what people are saying as the opposite of, what they're looking at commodity as a bad thing.
Well, it's just where you're caught in, that you're being driven out of. I mean, you have to talk to the people on the receiving end of Amazon to get a feel of what it feels like to get commoditized out of existence. You know,
Right.
and I mean, and I say, the smart way to approach Amazon is to use Amazon as a collaborator to kill your competition. You know? And because Amazon's worked out, Amazon's probably worked out to the nth degree the art and science of commoditization. Yeah.
But it's interesting that when you look at it, that the items.
But you're not in that. You're not in that business, Dean. And I'm not in that business.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But what I want to do though is the way I look at commoditize is to make something available and convenient for people. So I look at what when you look at what we've done with 90-minute books and what we've done with Dial Talk Done is what I look at that is we're commoditizing the valuable thing of creating a book and creating a podcast. We've made it something that you can buy off the shelf without any effort or having to know how to do any of it. We've made it we've made it a what that you can buy because we've got a team of who's that make those things happen.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Have you actually made things? Well, I mean, any breakthrough in the marketplace has, at best, four characteristics, but it should have at least one of them. It's faster, easier, cheaper, bigger. Like those are the four. And it seems to me you've made it faster, you've made it easier, you've made it cheaper. Bigger, I don't know, because it has to do with most of the people who use 90-minute book aren't thinking about bigger. They're thinking about additional. In other words, they've got another way of doing it, and I think podcasts as a vehicle for you and me have greatly extended our capabilities, faster, easier, cheaper. So, but neither of us is out there looking really for, we weren't searching the market for better podcast capabilities or anything like that. It's just that we knew that if we had a brand new idea and it was Saturday, if we didn't get to it by the end of Sunday, it wasn't going to happen.
Right. That's exactly right. And
you created it in response to your own need for how things have to happen really fast.
I look at that
because I've told all sorts of clients about Dial Talk Done, and none of them, as far as I know, have phoned you. Okay, and maybe some of them have, but anyway, but it served our purposes greatly.
Yes, absolutely, and that's part of the thing is that. Excuse me. I look at it that's kind of a. It was interesting to hear you talk about Kathy Ireland. When I look at taking entrepreneurs instead, just replacing busy women with busy entrepreneurs as our collective, both of us are our target audience, and that all of the things that they're going to need that's where I've kind of hitched. What I'm hitching my wagon to in going into the 20s is I'm looking for and identifying the trends that are going to be durable through that period and things where they're headed directionally. I think entrepreneurship in itself is growing in popularity as it becomes easier and easier to for people to actually start a business. I think we've picked a good horse to ride.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs. I've just been really observing, like, what are, looking at all of the things that are certainly going to change. Excuse me, over the decade of the 20s, and I look at, we alluded to it with what the problem with Harley Davidson right now is, that all the people who, bought their motorcycles as teens and 20-year-olds, and then rebought them in their 40s and 50s as they're reclaiming their youth, are now turning 65. And through the 20s, we're going to have over 10,000 people a day turning 65 for the entire decade. It's the biggest birth period of
since the boom.
I mean,
the millennials will be the millennials are
will be bigger. Yeah, they'll be bigger.
Yeah.
But right now, if you look at you look at the realities of the marketplace, all of the money is in the oldest end of the bell curve. It's all over there, and it's all transferring to the baby boomers. Are perfectly sandwiched in a way that their parents are still alive, some of them, and they're transferring wealth to them, and they're already pretty wealthy. So when you look at that, I look at the aging, the everybody turning 65 over the next 10 years. I look at the migration to Florida as a sure thing. Florida's poised to grow by 6 million people over the next decade. And you look at the GTA as in the same way. I mean,
Arizona is another one. Arizona.
Absolutely.
The South. The one thing is that cold becomes less acceptable as you get older.
Yes.
I know that. And air conditioning handles the hot. So
right.
More people, die of cold than they die of heat.
Yeah.
That's the thing about global warming. Actually, if you strip it away, that food supplies will go up on the planet if you have global warming. And the other thing is that there are fewer climate temperature deaths from heat than there are from cold. That's really as we move forward. The demographics are really a big deal. My generation, which is the smallest of the, I was in the first generation in American history that was smaller than the one before it. You had a big generation before me, then you have the drop. My generation really dropped because it was the Depression and the Second World War. And
you were what they call now the silent generation. Right?
Yeah, silent generation. We're silent, but we're actually per capita the wealthiest generation that the U.S. has ever had. Because we kind of hit a slot there because you were a child and a teenager during the Depression and the Second World War. Nobody in my generation, nobody in the silent generation actually fought in the Second World War. We came out the other side. It wasn't until the late 40s that you hit, fighting age or going into the job market. But when we got into the job market, it was nothing but opportunity. So one of my attitudes towards abundance and opportunity, I've just not experienced anything except abundance and opportunity since I could, I was conscious I was human, And so it was,
would you say, Dan,
the boomer generation was a fiercely competitive generation, just like the millennials are fiercely competitive because there's a lot of competing for. So it's an interesting thing how much we're influenced by who got born at the same time as we did.
Yeah. And it's
so I was looking at 1944, that 20% of people who were born in 1944 are dead. And, and 30% of them are acting as if they're dead.
Right. So you're really, ahead of the pack here.
Yeah.
Not many of them are having their best year ever.
Yeah, don't get into the competition business till you're 75,
Right. And then you're like, that's great.
You got a lot of people between you and the bear. You got a lot of people between you and the bear.
Yeah. I keep thinking now this might be the decade to apply myself, the 20s here. Imagine, Dan, if I applied myself.
Sure. It's certainly worth testing out.
It's worth testing out. I mean, that's pretty,
I would just create little experiments, and I wouldn't fully commit yet.
No, just imagine if I applied myself. Yeah.
Well, you're the first person who's really got me thinking about this importance of the new 20s. My parents grew up during the 20s. The 1920s, and it was clearly a remarkable period. It was a remarkable period, and still is remembered, the Roaring Twenties, and they call it the Roaring Twenties because by all standards it roared, economically, and new businesses taking off like a rocket, and everything like that, and certainly the 60s were significant just because of the turmoil, and I think the 80s were really, really significant because of the new technologies that were getting started.
Yeah. And look at what, what I really loved was at Abundance 360 in 2015, when you stood on the stage and said, as the opening, imagine that we're here and it's not 2015, but it is 1915. And we're here in this same room and we're the same group of people, entrepreneurs, wanting to understand the future of what's going to happen in the next 25 years. And you were talking about what we would be probably talking about today. In 1915, it was that electricity was just kind of making its way through the roadway system. Automobiles were sort of, imagine a world where everybody has an automobile and there's a network of roads that go all around the country. And so you look at this, when you look now, if we look at 2020, we look at the 20s in the context of looking back on it from 2050 and say, coming into 2020, we, as our call it our birthright or table stakes or just default thing, that you've got a radio station, you've got a television station, you've got
a publishing house.
You've got access to an instantly and infinitely scalable workforce that's available at your fingertips to do whatever it is you want to do. You've got access to money. You've got access to everything that I really, Dan, believe more than any other time in the world that the 20s is going to be the decade of ideas. That's really what is going to drive it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, I'm struck by the hour that we've been spending together, and I'm really thinking about that, and because this is my 8th decade that I'm in, so, and I'm just reflecting on it. But it's very, very interesting is, I made a reference, and I think I probably did it in both the workshops that you were in, both the 10 times in the Pre-Zone Frontier. I said, that whole thing that if you have a choice between the capability and cash, go for the be in a position where your cash is, you're so confident about cash just from what you're doing that you can choose a new capability because you just acquired invisible power because nobody knows the new capability that you've developed, and it's not detectable, it's not taxable. And yet it can make a 10 times difference. And a lot of people say, well, I've got to get cash so I can multiply cash. But I said, have investments that do that. But that's kind of passive. But from an active standpoint, capabilities are far more active and dynamic and exponential than cash.
The ability to multiply cash, the idea to multiply cash is more valuable or more important than the need for the actual cash to multiply.
Yeah.
Because if you've got the method, the way, the idea that demonstrably multiplies cash, there's no shortage of cash.
Yeah.
Cash is commoditized. Cash is commoditized. Everything now. Yeah.
Yeah. But a new capability, if it's invisible, not regulated, and not taxable, it's not commoditized because there's no competition because nobody even knows that you have it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So my feeling is it's Harry Potterish. It's an invisibility cloak, okay, so let's summarize some takeaways here.
I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. Well, have a bowl. One thing I got: have a bowl right next to the front door. As soon as you use your keys, pop them in the bowl.
Yeah.
And make it so for the next 25 years. So the thing is, learn the habit once. Yeah. Don't lose your keys again over the next 25 years. So that's good.
Absolutely the truth. That is friction freedom. That was funny. I think that is just observing where the friction is. That was without knowing it, really, that was an experience transformer.
Yeah, part of wealth is being friction free.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all of wealth, but it's certainly a big part of wealth.
I agree.
You got to give me. We're going to London next Sunday, England. And what's the airport service at Pearson that we?
Oh yeah, Black Lane.
Lane. One word or two words?
It's all one word. Black Lane. I would just do a Google. I'll send you a link to it. But I think if you just do a Google search on Black Lane airport services, and great. It's such a. I think you're gonna love it.
Fall in love with it.
Yes, absolutely. I have to say, this year in London with the new biometric passports, it was the fastest frictionless entry into the UK that I've ever had. I mean, literally just kept, I don't know why, but when you fly on Air Canada to Heathrow, it's like they land in Scotland and you've got to walk the rest of the way to England. If you've noticed how far the gate is from where if you didn't get your exercise before you left on the trip, you certainly get it upon arrival. Absolutely. So, but getting there, it was literally, you have the fast lane or whatever they call it.
Fast lane.
If you're flying business class, they give you the fast lane thing. So going through the fast lane, then you go through a turnstile that is, your passport is scanned, your picture.
Eyeball.
Push the button on the to answer the questions or whatever, and off you go. And I never spoke to a live border agent.
Same as Nexus coming into Toronto.
Yep. Just keep walking.
Yep.
It was that.
Yep.
It was that good. Smooth.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
Dan,
great.
I always enjoy these conversations. I look forward to them so much.
Okay. Well, next week we're in transit, so it'll be the week, and the next week we're in transit coming back. So we're going to be apart for a while.
3 weeks. Okay.
Yes, 3 weeks. Okay.
Save up lots of stuff for us to talk about.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Dan. Bye.